may speak to you in the name of God, who is grace and love and communion. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. When I was a kid, my favorite sport was reading in my bedroom on Saturday all day. And my favorite thing to read was fantasy. I loved it. I loved it all. I loved the pageantry. I loved the journeys. I loved the adventures. I loved the queens and kings, the princes and princesses, the magical beings, all kinds of things like that. It's wonderful. And as an adult, I became interested in medieval history as kind of a result, and sort of the next progression up. And though, as you know, I was born between a Lutheran home and a Roman Catholic home, in my heart I was always by the law of averages Anglican. And so I became super interested in the history of the kings and queens of England. The good, the bad, the ugly. In the case of King Henry VIII, all of the above. And I became really interested in the qualities and characteristics that make a good king. And the qualities and characteristics that most kings seem to have. If I even say the word king to you, a whole list of adjectives probably comes to your mind right away. Adjectives that come to my mind: powerful, wealthy, just maybe, or cruel. I think of someone with a crown, someone resplendent with furs and royal garments, someone who's larger than life, someone who with a word can command hundreds of people in an army, who can compel them to go and fight, be injured, and die on behalf of the cause that the king has chosen. I think of someone whose rule is absolute, whose coffers are deep, and if the coffers aren't that deep, they've got the power to go out and make them deep again. So I find today's celebration, this observation of Christ the King Sunday, to be frankly a little shocking. Because when I think of a king, what I don't think of is Jesus on the cross. Instead of a crown, he's a crown of thorns. Instead of a throne, he's hanging on a piece of wood at eye level. Instead of a castle, he's on some place called the skull. The very name which suggests a lifelessness, an end, the it. I find this image to be, frankly, a little offensive. It's not what I want a king to be. I want a king to be decisive and strong. I want a king to have power. I want a king to do just things in the world. I want a king to right wrongs. I want a king to make decisions so I don't have to do the job. I mean, if I'm being honest, sometimes I'd like to hand off all of my decision making to somebody else and trust them to do a good job. So it's still surprising to me when we get to Christ the King Sunday and we don't talk about Jesus the way he's depicted, for example, in the book of Revelation, where he is mighty, he's the Lamb seated upon the throne, the throngs of angels surrounding him. The only thing this Jesus has is a throng of mockers surrounding him. It's ironic, isn't it? That 3 times the people around him say, if you're the King of the Jews, if you're the Messiah, save yourself. That the inscription above him hanging on that cross, for anyone to come up and see, says, this is the King of the Jews. But it's not said in truth. It's said as a joke. It's said as a way to humiliate a humiliated person even more. That's kind of the way things go, isn't it? When we are feeling at our lowest, when our humiliation just feels like it can't go any lower, there's always some guy who's got a real gift for grinding you down a little bit more. There's that criminal. Let's say he's the criminal on the left. You know, how much worse can it be for this guy? He is on his own cross. He is in his own suffering. He is an extremis, and the best thing he can think to do is to give himself just a slight edge over that other guy. yeah, if you're the king of the Jews, go ahead and save us too. Ha ha ha. So interesting. And yet, we say that this is powerful. We say that this is salvation. How dare we say that? I was thinking about that a lot this week. And I went to go see a movie, which is inspired by an article that was written in 1998 and published in Esquire magazine. Esquire that month was doing a survey of heroes. And a writer who had done a lot of articles for Esquire, who had a real reputation for getting his subjects to be vulnerable and revealing and sharing a lot of details and creating, kind of cultivating a sense of trust with them, and then writing a deeply searing expose as a response. His editor gives him the assignment: go write 400 words to go with the picture. Just 400. It's slightly more than a caption, really. So he goes to meet his subject in New York City. And his subject is Fred Rogers. Fred Rogers. He's a guy that children think of as an adult, and adults think of as a child. Fred Rogers, when I was a kid, he was, there's great parodies of him on Saturday Night Live, and really every boy and not a few girls knew exactly how to make fun of him, to get his voice, to kind of nail his manner. He's really easy to make fun of, Mr. Rogers. He's just so gentle. He's just so nice. Fred Rogers. So they go, Fred Rogers, you remember, if you watched Mr. Rogers as much as I did, I would never tell my friends in middle school this, but then that's not for them to know. But you know, the best parts about Mr. Rogers, other than him looking you right in the eye and saying you're special, I like you just the way you are, is that he would go out into the world. So it wasn't just what he was doing in the studio, he'd go out into the world and look at things and share his sense of amazement and wonder. And it gave you permission to have amazement and wonder too. So he was at Penn Station, one of the most, in my humble opinion, unlovely places I've ever seen. He's at Penn Station looking at a big clock by the artist and architect Maya Lin. It's a complicated piece. Even for art lovers, it's an eyeful. And he was wondering if maybe the clock was just a little too fancy, his word, when he's talking about something complicated and wonderful and grown up, when he's talking to small children. But he decided that he's going to try and go anyway and share this fancy, wonderful thing with his audience. And as he's entering Penn Station, he gets out of the car and walks toward the entrance. He's instantly thronged by children, by adults, grown women who come up to him and say, Mr. Rogers, you were like a father to me. Mr. Rogers, thank you for my childhood. And behind him are his handlers, the TV producers, the people who are like, time is money, and especially if you're in public broadcasting. You're like, okay, Fred, let's move it along. But there was no moving Fred Rogers quickly through this crowd. Because every single person, man, woman, child that came up to him, he made eye contact with. He took the time to shake their hands, to really see them, to give them the fullness of his countenance, to give them the generosity of his touch, to let them know in a short time that they are loved, that they are precious, that grace abounds. Mr. Rogers. God, that's real power. It's real authority. We go back to the skull. Jesus on the cross, even Jesus needs help. because he prays to God. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I take so much comfort in that, because I know inside of myself, I'm not capable sometimes of doing that on my own. I can't say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, because of my own merit, because that's not what I want. According to my fantasy-fueled fiction childhood, what I want is retribution. I want the bad guy to get it. I want Darth Vader to be cut down. I'm switching genres here, but you know, Star Wars is the pivot in which all things turn. And Jesus says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And here we are, then we go back to our two criminals, left and right. One guy grinds him down. But the other guy says, don't you know who this is? Do you not see what's going on? Now, I want to pause here for a second and just remind us about something that's important about the criminal justice system in ancient Rome. Romans were very proud of their sense of justice. They really thought that they had done something good with the way that they had set up laws. And in order to be crucified, the worst form of punishment, in order to be crucified, you had to do something really, really bad. This wasn't steal a loaf of bread from the market kind of bad. This was the kind of stuff I hear about when I listen to true crime podcasts. This is really bad stuff. These guys that are hanging with him, they did something pretty egregious, pretty horrible. And in the Roman sense of justice, the only way to deal with that was a torturous death. So this guy on the right, he's not feeling like he deserves any better than he's getting. See how he says, we're just common criminals. This guy didn't do anything. And I find it would be really easy for me to sit here in a state of judgment, but then I remember the words that Brian Stevenson has said. Brian Stevenson, who's an activist to reform our criminal justice system. Brian Stevenson, who says, we are more than the worst thing we have ever done. We are more than the worst thing we have ever done. And that's what I'm thinking about. Because I'm thinking about some of the worst things I've ever done and the grace that I've received. I'm thinking about the times when I've been on the cross. Sometimes it's because of what the world is doing. Sometimes it's because of outside stuff. Sometimes it's because my body doesn't work the way that I think it should. Because I'm in pain. And sometimes, honestly, that cross is from my own making. I've made more than one. More than the worst thing we've ever done. And then he says, he also makes a prayer, two prayers in this passage. Isn't that amazing? Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And what does Jesus do? He says, I know what you did. I know what you did last summer. No, he says, today you'll be with me in paradise. It's that reminder that the kingdom of God is not up here somewhere, by and by, pie in the sky when you die. But that God's kingdom is very close. God's kingdom is here. God's kingdom is now. Not someday you'll be with me in paradise. Not at the eschaton at a time which will be determined by a lot of 1st and 2nd and 3rd century theologians. But today you will be with me in paradise. Because that's how grace works. That's how forgiveness works. If you've ever been forgiven by someone that you wronged, you know how liberating that is, how freeing it is. It is instantaneous, the feeling of feeling better. It is immediate, the knowledge that you are reconnected. This is the scandalous thing that we do here at church. This is the heart of it. The king that we worship is not the one with the crown and the purple robes, not the one with the armies and the authority. That the king that we worship is so powerful that he looks us full in the face, that he gives us the gentleness of his touch, that he gives us the love of his attention. That when we come to him and say, I just don't even know, I'm up here on the cross. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus says, even today, you're forgiven. As followers of this Jesus, we trust in the resurrection. We look around our church, we have all these beautiful crosses. The children's cross, which the kids took with them, I guess. Lovely thing that they can carry. This beautiful wooden cross here. Wonderful brass crosses. You know that the logo is built based on the cross that's up here on the altar. And especially the cross that our friend David Holmes made for us, weaving together the elements of the grapes and the hops and the wheat that we reminded of our sacramental life. But none of these crosses have the body on it. None of these crosses have the focus. They're all empty. They're all signs of the resurrection, which is a wonderful thing. But today we remember that sometimes we're on that cross. That before the resurrection, there's the crucifixion. And we remember that we never go through that alone. As followers of Christ. And sometimes the way that that works is that we are the ones who are Jesus with skin on. Maybe we're the ones who have to go out into the world and be the ones to look someone full in the face and say, you are loved, you are special, you are fancy, in the words of Mr. Rogers. This is our shared life. This is the King we worship. So much better than any fantasy I could ever imagine. In the name of